finish off this lesson, let's spend a little bit of time looking to see how we might connect this specific data set with some of the computable data that we have accessible through Mathematica. Now, this data set is a good example of the kind of data that's not going to be in Mathematica's general knowledge base. It's too specific. We might find it as a resource, like we did in this case, but we're not going to find it as something that we can query directly through the Mathematica notebooks. But we will find that the entities that are in this particular data set, many of them have links to computable entities in the knowledge base that Mathematica has access to. I have evaluated this entire section of the notebook in advance of making this screencast because some of the commands take a little while to execute and we didn't want to be waiting for them while we're learning about them. Okay, so Paul Revere is known to Mathematica in the sense that he has a person entity, and we can use timeline plot, for example, to show the interval between his birth date and his death date, so we can see when the man was born, when he died. We can also look at data about the Revolutionary War. We can ask for a data set. It tells us things like which countries were involved, when it began, when it ended, and so on. And if we timeline plot the lifespan of Paul Revere with the Revolutionary War, we see that this was only a small portion of the man's life. So when we think of Paul Revere, if we think of Paul Revere, we think of his midnight ride and the 1 if by land and 2 if by sea thing. But this is actually episodes in a much longer life. We can see, for example, we can search for other events which he was directly involved in, and we can add those to his plot here. So we can say, give us the historical events that involved, where when we search people involved, we find the entity for Paul Revere, and this gives us 3 separate events. And then we can do a timeline plot of those, and we can see here's the Revolutionary War, the Boston Massacre, the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and his famous midnight ride. Now, in Mathematica, one of the things that you have to be aware of is that there may be different entities that represent different aspects of the same event. So, for example, we have an entity that represents the Revolutionary War as a historical event, but there is also the American Revolutionary War, same event, entity relating to it as a military conflict. As a military conflict, one of its properties is battles, and we can request battles specific to the Revolutionary War that are not linked in any way to the Revolutionary War as a historical event. So if we ask Mathematica for how many battles it knows about related to the American Revolutionary War, it gives us a list of 242 items, and we can take 10 of those items, the first 10, and plot them on a timeline specifically. So the battles of Lexington and Concord is here, but other battles, Bunker Hill, Saratoga, Trenton, and so on, also show up in this timeline, and in fact there are quite a few of them. We can also, if we're interested, we can do something like we can say, give us historical site entities, that's another kind of entity, a third kind of entity, where the commemorated subjects include the American Revolutionary War military conflict. And then we're going to use GeoListPlot to plot these on a map centered on Boston with a range of 800 miles. And when we do this, we end up with this map of historical sites related to that in some way commemorate the American Revolutionary War. Our map is centered on Boston, where the Paul Revere's midnight ride took place, but as we can see, this war actually involved battles all over the place, including ones in places in Canada and to the west and to the south, and so on.